Hello, everyone. This is Lupe Munoz.
And this is Steve McKeon, and we're here with Leadership Exchange. Really excited to enter into our third podcast of our newfound series.
This is, as you said, number 3. The last time we talked about the 4 types of leaders, and the one that we talked about that was, hey, they have the values, they value their team members, and then they also get things done, or they're effective with their teams. So we want to expand on that, and today we want to talk about servant leadership. When you talk about servant leadership, Steve, what comes to mind? What's the first thing you start thinking about?
First thing that comes to mind is what are the different types of leadership, and kind of in the common era, there are really 6 designated types. So there's the transformational leader, there's the delegative leader, there's the authoritative leader, transactional leader, participative leader, and then the servant leader, which, you and I both really align a lot of the work that we do around. And, so that's kind of the thought that I put into when people say servant leader. What are those attributes that are considered as part of servant leadership? And I think the very first one is that as a servant leader, you put others before yourself. And with that, I think Lupe, is kind of the foundation. To be a servant leader, you have to really give of yourself to your team in order for them to be aligned and to really get them to that next level that you're looking for. How about you? Give me your thoughts on servant leadership and how you tie that into the start of our conversation today.
So the first thing that comes to mind is the pyramid. So if you think of an organization, a leader and their team, you see the leader at the top, and then you see everyone that reports to the leader underneath. And as the pyramid, you head towards the base of the pyramid, right? It expands, and all the weight is being supported by the team members. So the mindset is, hey, you work for me. I'm the leader. You're going to work for me. And that language is actually used, right? People will say, oh yeah, so-and-so works for me. The flipping of the pyramid is the paradigm shift that people need to make to be a servant leader. So take the same pyramid, the same general people in each section of the pyramid, and flip it over. So what do you get? You get the team members on the top. And let's say if you're a department manager, the supervisors are in the middle. And then at the very point on the bottom is the leader. So what does that indicate? That indicates that the leader is actually there to support the supervisors, and the supervisors are there to support the team members that do the work. So it's a very different way to look at the world. And I think that a lot of people fall into the trap of seeing it the way the normal pyramid looks like. So I'm the leader, the supervisors are here to support me, and the team members are there to support the supervisors. So very different way to think, right, Steve?
Yeah, and at its core, Lupe, it's really about ethical decision making, really putting the needs of others first, followed by the building of those high performance work teams that we'll go into in future podcasts. But I want to focus right now just a little bit on what it means to be a servant leader, because I don't want to say it's a new concept, but it's a non-traditional concept in terms of how leaders behave in organizations. And what makes it non-traditional is the fact that you've got to work at it. It's easy to be given a title and then become the lord of the land and provide edicts and direction to the team. In the servant leadership cycle, it's about vulnerability, right? You're not necessarily going to have all of the answers, but your job as that leader is to find ways to remove obstacles from the team members that you're supporting. Part of that is to gain trust from them so that they're willing to share with you those challenges that they're facing. And that comes through being present, listening, being in the areas where the work is happening, and through that activity, you can start to gain insight. Lupe, why don't you talk a little bit about gaining that insight and the importance of that with a servant leader?
So, my experience has been that the best way, and this is part of the servant leader, is leading with humility. And so, a way to be able to do that is you spend the time to get to know the team. So, one of the things that I practice that I was taught and I think is very effective is whenever I join a new team, a team I'm responsible for leading, that I'm going to be part of, the first days that I'm with the team, I'm doing one-on-one interviews. There's a framework to that where I'm asking them questions like, what are the things that you would like to see different? What's one thing you would improve if you were me? Those types of questions, because I really want to understand where everyone's mind is in regards to the team and how everything's working. But I also spend quite a bit of time getting to know them and for them to get to know me, because I think without that happening, it's going to be very difficult to earn trust. And we're going to talk about trust as a leader a few episodes from now, but I think that the initial discussion about the team members and asking and really wanting to know about them. And you don't force it. You ask, hey, share whatever you'd like to share with me. And sometimes they share quite a bit. And I think that's awesome because it allows you to be able to connect with them. And it also allows you to be vulnerable and share of yourself versus using that cookie cutter thing that basically looks like a resume, right? So, hey, I went to school here. I've done this. I've done that. It's not really about that. It's more about these are the things that we share, commonalities, I guess you could say. And it really helps bind the team and myself as a leader to the team as individuals. So I think what you said was spot on around you got to lead with humility. And I think that's one way to demonstrate humility is to spend the time to get to know them and really understand what is it that they would like to see from you as a leader, because you're there to serve.
Yeah, and Lupe, I think you really, at least my perception in seeing you in recent times, you know, join two new teams and follow that practice and pursuit. And I would say that through those activities, one of the things that I recognized is just how you take the time and not try to make change immediately. And through that activity and through that process, it allows team members to gain alignment, start to build that trust with you as a leader, simply by asking them questions. What do you need from me? How can I help you? And it just, it's really a powerful thing when, ask those questions. I think what's kind of funny when, I think about it is that, after working with you for about 5 years, we were introduced to a book called It's Your Ship. And after I read through the first couple chapters of it, I said, "Hey, Lupe, this guy is following your script on, how to join a team." And I think Commander Ashroff in his book really talks about a lot of the details that are part of what you do, Lupe, kind of naturally. And I can tell you that I've had similar opportunities to practice that same activity. And I can also tell you in an earlier state of my career, as I was with a big multinational company and we would go in and acquire another company, we did not do that. Our job in those situations was to go in and really kind of assess quickly their capabilities, vulnerabilities, where our liabilities were as a company. And it was not a fun place to play. And so in order to really drive positive change, it took a change in direction, it took a change in activity. And through a large acquisition with one of the companies I was working for formerly, we decided to go in with a little different approach. And that was, hey, let's talk to the people that were joining, that are joining our team, and find out, what do they know about our new liabilities that we picked up as a company? What do they know about the current risks and hazards within those environments, and what are they doing already to correct it. Let's not go reinvent the wheel. Let's help them, kind of build on what they're doing as we've come into those organizations. So, there's plenty of examples where companies and individuals that take on new leadership roles have that opportunity to practice that servant leadership paradigm, which is really, hey, first thing, get to know your teams. From that, Lupe, what do you think is the next part of the, gateway to being a good servant leader? What do you do after the opportunity to meet your teams?
One thing I do want to point out before I answer your question, Steve, you called out a great book, and I loved that book. I agree that it does parallel some of the things that you and I believe in and have done. Another great book that really helped me as far as being able to have a plan when I join a team is a book by Michael Watkins that's called The First 90 Days. And so, for our readers, if you want to understand the process of joining a team and how you can't, the old saying of what got you here won't get you there, this book really helps understand that and come up with a actionable plan for joining a team and what you do. And to your point, you want to be able to start building the trust. And one thing to answer the question is, you have to start listening more than telling. So a lot of leaders, as you said, come in. I do recognize that some situations may be dire when you join a team. There might be, things going very, very badly and they need to take immediate action. But most of the time, there's an opportunity to listen, to learn, to humble yourself, to ask a lot of questions, to really help understand, but also start teaching people what you believe in, what you value, and start exposing them to some of those new things. And if you recall my story about that foreman that turned supervisor, that was exactly how that happened. Is I really started asking him questions that started to really turn his previous thoughts on their side, and they started to make a lot of sense to him. He started answering my questions, and he really latched on to the thought of and the concept of servant leader. But you have to listen, you have to ask questions, and you've got to listen intently. You can't just give lip service to people, and it allows you to really connect on a very deep level and start to establish that trust.
Yeah, that's great, Lupe. And that's, it's a lot of work to go through that, right? So, there's not an easy button you can press. You've got to really have a plan and a commitment to set up those meetings, go through those reviews, let people know that you're focused on them. And, one of the things that you'd brought up, this method of, how you ask questions. And for those on the podcast that maybe haven't heard that before, it's the process of asking open-ended questions and letting the person that you're asking the question of come up with answers. And the importance of that, it really develops dialogue, and it also shows humility as a leader, that you're not telling them what to do. You're showing that, hey, I'm not sure what to do, and you are someone that I trust to give me the answer what to do next. And we've both had experiences where individuals that we were working with, as we took on that practice and learned the value of it,
Yes,
thought we
yes.
were just crazy, right? They were saying, hey, why are you asking me that question? I Don't you know the answer already? And I think we both got very humorous conversations that we can embellish on here, that kind of talk through some of those. And Lupe, if you want to go ahead and take one that jumps out at you, and then I'll share one of mine as well.
Yeah, it's funny because people have been programmed to believe that the leader is the one that makes the decisions. Everyone else just executes, and the way we are trying to get people to think of leadership is that it's actually the opposite in some way. I mean, you're there, definitely. you're going to know, you're going to have an opinion. You'll probably have some technical knowledge around the team that you're leading, whether it's in manufacturing or whether it's in sales or marketing or banking, whatever the situation may be. There's going to be some competency around the business. But when it comes to people, I have a great story on this. There was a technician or a mechanic. I was newly assigned as a supervisor. I'd been hired by this company as a supervisor for this maintenance group, and it was funny to have my first interaction with him. I won't use his name because I want to protect the innocent, but he was one of those straight shooters. I'll call him Joe. Joe was one of those individuals, a very smart guy, very confident, and very outspoken. I mean, he told it like it was. Whatever was on his mind, he would tell you. And I remember one time there was a conveyor that had a gearbox and a motor that was failing. The unit, the assembly was failing, and he goes, Lupe, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, oh, Joe, what do you think we should do? And he threw his rag down. He was so disgusted. He was like, why are you here? You're the boss. You need to tell me what I need to do. And I explained to him, and to make sure that he first, I told him what I thought. I told him about that particular type of gearbox, that it was prone, especially the way it was installed, wasn't really meant to be on its side. And because of that, there was probably, the seal's bad, had a leak and it failed. And so likely thing to do is just pull the whole thing off. We have a spare unit and we can look at it afterwards. And he says, well, you had the answer. Why didn't you give that to me right when I first asked you? And I explained to him, I said, look, I know that I'm new, and your statement about I'm the leader, so I need to have the answers. I don't know that I agree with that, because you're a pretty competent person. You're pretty smart, and everyone else here is also that way. So why would I not value your opinion on this? And he thought about it, right? He thought about it, and he says, well, I don't know, but he's like, if you're the supervisor, you should be making the calls. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to approach things different. I think one of my jobs is to help this team be successful. And sometimes that means I need to tap into that capability that each one of you has and give you the confidence to be able to do that. I'm facilitating everyone's success here. I'm not directing. And he thought about it and kind of grumbled and kept moving. Fast forward a month later, he calls me over. We're on the floor, and he goes, Lupa, come here. And I said, what's up? And this was, after a month of seeing me do what I was doing and how I was approaching things. He goes, hey, I think I get it. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I get what you're trying to do. I see it. He says, I understand now that you're very different than what we're used to. He says, and I kind of like it. And I said, well, good. I said, I'm glad. So hopefully I'll stay in this role for a little bit. But he really started to understand that I wasn't there to call all the shots. I was there to help the team succeed. And that meant a lot of things. That meant gathering resources when they were needed. That means being the champion for a particular goal that they wanted to get. And if they needed support from me or from the leadership team that I was reporting to, then I had to go and have those discussions to try and get that support. And the team really started responding, and Joe was the first one to start to really embrace that idea. That team did some amazing things because I think they started to get the support they needed instead of the direction that they needed. Sometimes direction is needed. I'm not saying it's not, but you get so much more capability from people when you really start to ask them and allow them to be part of making a big difference to the team success.
Oh, that's a great story, Lupe. And you know, I've got a similar story background. Back in several years ago, in my defense contracting days, we had a facility that we had to rebuild some vehicles that had seen better days, and it was important to the customer that we had at the time that we could get these vehicles turned around in a really short period of time. And you know, I'll never forget you know, having that opportunity to go in there. And you know, as I'm talking to the different team members, you know, these senior mechanics, they've been doing this kind of work forever. The difference was these were, you know, battle damaged vehicles. And you know, we had to change the the way we were thinking about, you know, the repair of these vehicles. And you know, as I'm there asking, you know, very open ended questions of the mechanics, you know, one of the mechanics, I'll just call him Mechanic Z, came up to me and said, "Mr. McKeon, have you ever in your life pulled a wrench out and removed a single part from this type of vehicle?" And I answered him. I said, "No, I haven't." And he looked at me and he says, "What in the heck are you doing here then?" And I said, "My goal is to understand the things that are preventing you from turning that vehicle around in a very short period of time and getting it back out to the folks that need it." And he goes, well, let's see. And so through that experience and just getting to know Mr. Z better and kind of share with him and ask lots of open ended questions, you know, he learned to recognize that what I was asking is, you know, where can I help? What rock can I move? You know, what activity do I need to take on so that you can do what you do really good, which is repair these vehicles so they can get back to some people that need them. And you know, through that process, you know, he became one of the most vocal champions that I had in the organization around, you know, what we need to do differently, and really became a, you know, kind of change from that I would say ugly command and control leader, like, you know, I'm the senior mechanic, everybody does it my way, to, you know, learning to empower his team by asking them opening questions. What do you need for me to help you perform this maintenance repair to this vehicle? And you know, through that exercise, you know, we were able to really make a difference to the
Great
customer
story.
and to the people that need those vehicles back right away. So yeah, similar account. And then you know, I think related to this, Lupe, is, you know, the activity of you know, and you mentioned a little bit ago, but what you say and what you do. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I think as leaders, you know, we get caught up in kind of our aura, right? Who we are. And you know, there's such a importance of understanding that folks are watching, folks are looking at how you behave. And you don't have to command, you don't have to, you know, instruct, but you just have to be present and act in a way that will really help folks understand, you know, the activity, the expectations you have as a leader. So why don't you walk me through a couple examples you have there?
I'd say the first thing to keep in mind when we talk about what you say and what you do is there are, you know, there's different ways to talk to people. People sometimes will talk to a team member or a peer a certain way, and then the CEO shows up and they'll talk to him a very different way. And I believe the best approach is always to talk to people the same way. So I'm going to treat a team member, a peer, with the same respect and the same demeanor as I would a senior leader, because I want everybody to understand that we are all special. No one is more special than anyone else. So when we're talking, we're all part of a team. We're not, you know, my title means nothing. It's the type of person that I am that should be what people respect. And that's what I'm working towards. And so what I say are things that will always support an inclusive attitude, I guess you could say. We talk about we. I don't like to talk about I or my. I really focus on the things that we do, the success that we have when I talk to team members. And then, I spend time out on the floor. And this is one thing that I tell teams when I first joined them, because I had a leader who told me this, and initially I was skeptical, but then when I saw them do it, it really meant a lot. It said something to me about what they valued, and that's to go out to the floor, spend time with people, see how they're doing, ask what can be done to help, what what resource do you need, how's everything going, how's your family, etc. And I think that really helps people understand that you are there, you're demonstrating that humility, by being on the floor, spending time with them, instead of being in your office or always being in a conference room having meetings. There's time and place for that. Also, sometimes it's necessary, but when you have the opportunity, you want to be out there, you want to be seen, you want to see them. And I think that those types of things of what you do, and the interaction that you have and what you say can be very powerful, and really starts to, again, add to another layer of trust to people that are part of the team you're part of.
Yeah, that's a great example, Lupe. And the one I want to share is when I was in the automotive industry. I was working on a product line that was struggling. It was a new product. The customer was very excited about it. Our manufacturing capability was challenged, and we could not deliver, what they needed. And I can remember the president and vice president of the organization I worked at coming in and giving the team kind of this big speech about the importance of, as a team, we need to look at our constraints, figure out, which things we need to tackle first that are preventing us from meeting, our delivery schedules and our requirements. And, one team member in that room raised his hand and said, it just seems to me like if we didn't have to shut down for 15 minutes twice a day and 30 minutes at lunch, there's a whole extra set of time that we can get things produced. And I listened to that information come in, and I thought, okay, how are we going to do that? We've only got so many people. Where are we going to get the additional folks from? The president of the company I was working with at the time said, "We got it. Thank you for that great suggestion." And then every member of his direct staff learned to run that manufacturing line so that during breaks, they just simply would filter in and cover down. And I can remember at one point having the vice president of operations and the president of the company on each shoulder of mine as I was working one part of that assembly line. And, that was early on in my career. And I just really learned that it's what you say and what you do that matters. And you just saw the reaction from the team. Those employees were engaged. They said, "Hey, these guys got us covered. They're here to support. They're here to help. And we're going to figure out a way to get through this." So just, really a moving experience for me early on in my career as a leader. And, I'll never forget that.
That's a great story, Steve. I think one last thing on this topic is, I can't remember the exact name of the video. It was a TED talk. It talked about a story set in a chocolate hobnob factory, which apparently is some kind of candy. But the story is around the keys to leadership. It tells a story. The final, I guess, lesson from the video was that there's two keys to great leadership, and that's that it's all about you and it's not about you, which sounds crazy, right? It's like, wait a minute, up is down and down is up. But what they're really trying to say is when things go wrong and maybe the team makes a mistake, you need to realize that it's all about you. So it all comes down to leadership. So what can you do different? What can you do better? How can you approach things different? And then when things go great and there's success, you've got to be sure to give credit to your team, because the team is what made that success, and the team is who you're supposed to be serving day in and day out, trying to meet their needs, trying to help them be successful, because the belief is that team members want to be the best they can be every day. So if that's not happening, then you got to reflect and say, what can I do different? How can I make changes? And then you have to also be able to create that environment. And we'll talk a lot about that in the future, but creating the environment to allow people to be successful.
Absolutely, Lupe. And I just would add that, give our listeners the reference that you brought up. It's Peter Adderton's video on TED Talks, and he talks about great leadership comes down to only two rules. And that's all about you, and it's not about you. And so really encourage folks to go out and listen to that video if you haven't heard it already, or if it's been a while since you've heard it in relationship to these conversations. So Lupe, this has been an interesting and fun conversation. I know we got a ton more to talk about with servant leadership. You want to kind of cue it up for our next episode and the things that we're going to be talking about?
Yes, we're going to be talking about on our next episode, managing versus leading. So, like, what does that mean? What's the difference between the two? Another way to think of it, and the way we like to think of it, is transformational versus transactional leadership. So that'll be our next topic. But today, servant leadership was what we hope to share with everyone. And we kind of packed with quite a few things there, and a few recommended books and a video for those of you that are interested in seeing more or learning more about this. This concludes our episode for today. We appreciate everyone's ear, and we hope that you've gotten some value from it. And this is Lupe Munoz
and Steve McKeon with the Leadership Exchange. Thank you, everybody.